some guy with too much time on his hands had come up with this idea of combining Wizard of Oz with Dark Side of the Moon.
Some of the songs were played initially just as individual songs, but we got right up to the point of performing the piece live before we went into the studios.
Dave was always the musical force. He understands the musical aspects of Dark Side of the Moon.
We're talking about a period when there was a limit to what you could do to tidy things up. I mean, this is not recording as it is today, where you've got everything so separated out and so many tracks to play with that you can afford, after you finish the session, do an awful lot of modifying.
It changed around a lot. The thing that became the On the Run section was sort of a live jam, and there were one or two other bits which were very different. Some of the songs were much slower and ploddy. I listened to a bootleg sort of recording of it from Brighton, 1972, I guess it was. It's very different. Alan Parsons had suggested that we use this girl, Claire Torrey, when we had been trying to think of something to do with that track, because it was just a backing track, there were no lyrics for it, and we had thought of getting a girl in on it to sing. And she came in and was a very English-looking girl. Didn't look like she'd have a voice, but she opened her mouth and it was brilliant. I can't remember how many tracks of her we recorded. Certainly we had to direct her into what sort of thing to do. We told her to sing one quietly and sing one really flat out, belting it all the way, and we had a few goes at it, and then we bounced those tracks down to the one that you hear. She didn't do it that way in one performance all the way through ever, but she was certainly brilliant. Eclipse originally was called, of course. At the beginning, they were all separate pieces. I don't know at what point it was that Roger came in with the idea of tying it into a theme of madness and tying the whole record together like that, which is what we had been doing anyway. On Metal, the previous one, and Atom Heart Mother, we'd been tying these long things together. When it's going well is when it's heated. You fight for your corner. And Roger's corner tended to be the dynamics and the lyrics and getting the meaning and the message across, and mine tended to be more making the music really work. And there are points where, you know, you've got a vehicle that's supporting the words and trying to keep the balance between the importance, the weight of the words and the beauty of the music.
You might actually find that we'd work on some pieces of music, even though we didn't at the time know what was going to go in between the various verses or the various choruses or whatever.
That one I think is true.
Yeah.
I'm buying that one.
The last time the Stones were good, that's for sure.
Steve Russell is with us. He's Playboy's deputy editor. This is not the music edition of Playboy magazine.
Well, it's
so
true. Post-tattoo you, what did they do?
We're not getting into a discussion about
All
music
right,
right
fine.
now. It's in the November Playboy issue with Daryl Hannah on the cover again. The article is called Straight Dope, and it's some of the urban legends surrounding drug use. But some of the other things, and I actually find them humorous. One of them about Grace Slick, but I want to get to that in a second. But the thing about Pink Floyd and the Wizard of Oz, we've actually talked about it on this show.
Yeah.
And there is a debate. Kevin's done it, and he says it works.
I've never done it.
How stoned were you at the time that you thought it worked?
I was watching the movie and watching Wizard of Oz and listening. I was pretty stoned, but allegedly.
Let's face it took somebody really stoned to come up with this idea to begin with, and to go, to figure this out.
I'm telling you, it works. There are, not always, but there are parts that work.
Radio people seem to have been the main people who got this one out there and got this myth going. But I'm not saying there's not some similarities. I'm not saying there's some amazing parallels. But when you go to a guy who was intimately involved in the process of putting this album together, the producer Alan Parsons, who also he was the Alan Parsons Project as well. Well, he was there for the whole thing, and he says he never heard any of the members of Pink Floyd once discussing Wizard of Oz while they were recording this. And if they were, if they were that dedicated to this idea and this concept, you'd think it would have come up in the studio. Plus, he points out as sort of a side note that when they recorded Dark Side of the Moon in 1973, they didn't even have VCRs.
That's right.
Then. So it wasn't like these guys were popping down the Blockbuster, getting a copy of Wizard of Oz, and saying, "Oh, okay, let's write something, rewind that." And then they would have had to have like a reel-to-reel and their own copy of the movie, and have been pretty elaborate setup. And again, he says they never watched it or even discussed it in the theater. I mean, in the recording studio.
But is it worth it just for the experience to see what people are talking about?
Oh, everybody should do it.
Yeah,
sure,
you should do it because there are some things on it that will make you go, "Wow."
There are things like brain damage, sort of on the same time as Scarecrow is singing "If I Only Had a Brain." But I would argue that there are way many more things that don't match up in it than do.
Yeah, I think it's worth the experience, though.
Yeah.
However, as we point out, if you crank up AC/DC's High Voltage while you're watching Mary Poppins, you'll learn the meaning of life.
Yeah, that's right. Bye.